three of us, sort of, if you were on the call just a little bit before we started, you know that we just sort of eat, sleep, drink, and love organization design, and we try and bring, I think the three of us bring a really nice blend of looking at org design and change from an applied research point of view. I mean, Sue and I kind of do the research that you would hope business schools would do in terms of getting out and actually working with organizations and both helping them on the one hand and trying to generate new knowledge about org design on the other. And then Beth joined us a couple of years ago after having been a real partner with us at CEO when she was at General Mills. And she brings a really pragmatic sense. So in case Sue and I ever get a little too principle-based and theory-based, Beth can bring us down to the ground. But I think you'll find that Sue and I are also pretty connected to the ground as well. But Beth's practice knowledge around this is really a great addition. And the three of us, hopefully you'll find out soon enough, the three of us have a pretty good time trying to deliver on this material for you. What I want to do today, what Beth and I want to do today is, what we found is the week is a full 3.5 days. I think it's fair to say you're not going to get cheated in terms of the kind of material and the amount of material, and hopefully you'll think the quality of the material is really, really good. And so to hit the ground running, we wanted to do this pre-webinar and introduce you to the primary model that we'll be using, which is the STAR model. It was developed by Jay Galbraith. I think it's generally accepted that between the STAR model and maybe the McKinsey 7S model, they're the two most popular, most widely used models of organization design. And Jay was a research scientist at the center for a number of years, and he got there right as I was leaving with my doctorate, and Sue's been with him for a long time, and so we've adopted this model as the one we think does the best job of helping people think about organization design in a systematic and a systemic way. And so I'll talk a little bit about the model, try and walk you through it and introduce the different points. And then at slide 15, because we figured out exactly what slide it is, Beth, I'll turn it over to Beth, and she'll talk about it. Again, having been through the course, having been through and worked with us for a long time, what's the best way to get the most out of the workshop? And then we'll try and leave some time at the end in case you have some questions about logistics or assignments or the days or any of the concepts that we talked about. So it'll go kind of fast. We just want to begin to introduce you to some of the vocabulary and some of the relationships and things that we're going to be talking about during the seminar and the workshop. So we wanted to start with kind of a tongue-in-cheek polling question, and just to get a sense of your own experience with organization design. And so, you know, we're going to bring up the poll here on the right-hand side. Hopefully you can see it. And we just want to get a sense of your sort of background. You know, are you sort of the person you've heard of org design, but you're not sure what it is and you're trying to figure that out, and so you're coming to the seminar to learn about it? Have you watched consultants sort of screw it up and you think, well, I actually need to do it better than they did it, and you want to come in and find some things out? Have you been involved in quite a few organization designs, and you either messed it up or helped to mess it up and think you can actually do better and you want to come and listen about that? Or are you a rock star and you've sort of been at this for quite some time and you really want to deepen your expertise in organization design? So just pick one of those four, and we'll kind of get a sense from the 5 or 6 people that are on the call, you know, where you're at. So just go ahead and pick one of those, have some fun here, and see. This also helps Beth and Sue and I. It also helps us sort of make sure that the pitch of the 3.5 days is right. We had an earlier seminar last week, and we asked the same question. So based on the responses, this will give us a little bit of a sense of people's backgrounds. Okay. So Nora, if you can put up the results, let's see how we're doing.
All right. There's one person I think still, it says one in progress, so let me give him a second.
It
All
could be
No,
me.
that might have been me just to look at it.
I was going to say, I didn't answer either.
Yeah.
All right. It should be coming.
Got it. Okay, so you got one person who's like, I'm just new at this, trying to understand it. 3 people who have watched consultants and said, oh my gosh, there's got to be a better way. And a couple of people who have been involved in sort of getting things in place and want to build some expertise. That's pretty cool, right? I think on the other webinar, roughly the same. I think we maybe had 1 or 2 people who said they were pretty good at this stuff. But most of the people kind of in the B and C. Do you agree, Beth?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and that's part of the fun of coming to the program is that you're going to get exposed to people in the session who have a wide variety of experience. So you can learn from, you can commiserate with, you can find almost a therapy partner to walk through experiences you've had or that you're going through. So this gives us a good sense of that spread that we're going to have as well.
Yeah, exactly. And, this was tongue-in-cheek. The truth is that there's a lot of good work in org design taking place. There's people doing it really well. But the sad part is there's a lot of people who are not. And we really do at this time in this, at this time in history and in our society, we need to do this better. So that's really kind of our purpose, is trying to figure out ways to transfer this knowledge to you and our experiences so that you can do it better, because that's really what we're sort of after here. Okay. The definition of org design, sorry, I got distracted. A call was coming in on my cell phone. The definition of org design that we use is sort of highlights that design is both a noun and a verb. It's a noun in the sense that we're going to talk about the STAR model, and this represents some choices that the organization has for how it puts together strategies, structures, systems, and processes. But it's also it's a process. And so in that sense, organization design has a lot of relationships with organization development, in that we're trying to change the organization in a positive way to improve its performance and effectiveness. So it's a process, right? And we're going to talk about that process of the redesign flow, what we call the redesign flow, of purposefully configuring, right? We're talking about intentionally changing the way the organization is put together. So it's an intervention. And we're going to try and configure, right? We're going to try to assemble and orchestrate the different parts of the STAR to achieve some valued outcomes. And those can include financial performance and cost reductions and productivity and things like that. But increasingly in today's world, organizations are also being asked to attend to customer satisfaction, customer loyalty issues, employee engagement, and social outcomes such as community involvement, social responsibility, and sustainability on the ecological side. So when the objective function changes from something very simple, like improve performance, I say it's very simple, it's not. We also want to talk about the choices that you make and the choices that you have, because we think that's the weak muscle in most HR business partners and some other groups that get involved in org design. So we wanted to help you build those choices, but also be sure that you see it in the context of a process of change and redesign. So we're going to try and blend those nouns and verbs together, as you will. We're starting from a place of design thinking. It's a pretty popular term these days. It's been popularized by people like IDEO and other groups as they get into product design, experience design, and we're just going to take some of these things. We've been talking about this stuff for a long time and researching and practicing this stuff for some time. But it sort of comes, they all have some similar bases. And those similar bases is we're going to look at that bottom of the slide. We need to understand the relevant first principles. the basics of org design, kind of the principles. I hate to call it the physics of org design. In other words, we're not just going to pull a lever and something happens, but there are some relationships between the choices of structure that you make and the kind of culture that you're going to get. So we want to get into those first principles at the very bottom of this chart, and talk about how they influence the way you design the organization or the solution. That solution is the sort of the output of a tension between two things. On the one hand, the organization has some problems to solve, some threats, disruptions, some opportunities and goals they're trying to achieve aspirationally, things that they would like to accomplish in products or services or being in service to the world. At the same time, there's some tension there because what we want to do, we can't always do because we don't have unlimited resources. We can't always have all of the best engineers, or we can't have all of the best marketers. We have a few good marketers, a few great marketers. We have some technology. We may not have the best technology. So there's constraints to what, given those aspirations, there's constraints in thinking about how those might get done. And given those constraints, we have to come up with criteria. What is it that we want this product or service to be able to do in service of our objectives, goals, outcomes, and that sort of thing? So there's a tension there. We want a lot, but we can't always get everything we want, and so we have to define those criteria. The easy example that we often use is if Boeing, we shouldn't talk about Boeing, I guess that's not a good idea. If Airbus is trying to design the next generation of airplane, with all the environmental issues, that plane, they're talking now. I don't know if you saw it in The Economist. They're asking now if everybody should stop flying. So if they're going to build a new airplane, they're going to have an airplane that really does not have much of a carbon footprint. And that means the plane's going to have to be really light. It's going to have to be incredibly fuel efficient. It's going to have to create a great experience for the people on board. And at the same time, the airplane companies, they need to make a profit. They need to be seen as innovative. Those are their objectives. And so out of that tension comes a design concept, a particular way of how big the plane is going to be, how far it can go on a gallon of gas, and that sort of thing. Well, if I'm going to build that airplane, I need to know some things. First principles. I have to have some engineering knowledge. I have to have some knowledge of carbon fibers, of the latest jet engine technologies. I better have some really good ability to make some choices so I can make the trade-offs that get the plane that we want and need. So that's what underlying the course is being sure that you're equipped with some of those relevant first principles, so that as you go through the redesign process, you can apply those principles when leaders and executives and functional heads start asking you questions about what are the pros and cons of these different choices. That's what we want to equip you with, is that set of first principles. And the simplest way we found to do that is to use the STAR model. And it's developed by Jay Galbraith. You'll see in the readings there's a couple of different versions of the model. Sometimes they take the strategy box there at the top and they put it in where we have capabilities and work processes. And all of the processes are often dropped down to the lower right hand, and it just simply says processes. We think this is a better representation of the work you're actually going to do in terms of getting clear about the strategy and then figuring out what the work processes are that are going to manifest and bring that strategy to life. So I'm going to go around each of these pieces and just say a couple of things for each one. And just to try and give you some vocabulary, stick some of these ideas in your mind so that you can sleep on them before you come to the seminar in Southern California in a couple of weeks. Okay? And again, if you got any questions or anything along the way, put them in the chat box, and Beth or Nora will interrupt me, and we're happy to answer those questions along the way. You'll see right at the start, at the top of the model is strategy. We have this real conviction that it's really hard to design an organization if there is no strategy. And so we're not going to spend the 3.5 days talking about strategy, because we could, but we have to get to everything else. So what we want to do in the strategy portion of the class, which happens right, first thing Tuesday morning, Beth and I start getting after this, is we want to give you some tools so that if the strategy isn't clear, we want to give you some tools that allow you to figure out what the strategy is, or get a really good first approximation of the strategy, right? And we'll talk about the direction the organization is heading. We're sort of heading in this direction now, and we want to move from this direction to a different direction. So what's the nature of that shift in direction? We want to get and talk about how things, to what extent is the organization more or less aggressive than its competitors? Is it narrower or broader in its product line, right? So if you think about, Google and Microsoft are in competition. They're in roughly the same kinds of things. Google has a big lead in search, and Microsoft is trying to figure out how to catch up with Bing. On the flip side, Microsoft seems to be doing pretty well in the cloud. Google wants to catch up in that. So how aggressive does Google have to be? What does its product and services within that space have to look like if they're going to make some inroads with Microsoft? Vice versa, how does Microsoft think about search in a way that would allow them to find a way to break into that very dominant position that Google has? And strategy gives us answers to those kinds of questions. So we're going to talk about some of the tools and that you can use, again, to get a really good first approximation if you're dealing with an organization or a functional unit that is not very clear about its strategy.
And that's, Chris, before we move on from strategy, I just want to make the point is that for those of you who do and are doing active design work, you know that your leaders are coming to you, and predominantly they will lead with, here's a structure I want to move to, or here is a redesign that I want you to implement for me. I think what you're going to find is we start, right, as Chris said, on Tuesday with strategy, because that is really going to drive everything that we talk about around the STAR. And I think so often individuals who get into org design, and myself included early on, I didn't know how to speak the language of strategy with my line leaders, and then being able to translate it into org design. So I think what you're going to find is this piece up front is really going to set the tone and give you some tools and some skills to go back and really sort of rewind your leaders and get them out of that trap of falling right into the STAR, the structure point on the STAR.
Yeah. No, well said. And we'll do our best to sort of provide some definitions around strategy and business model and operating model. A lot of times when Beth or Sue and I are going into organizations, people start talking to us in these languages.
Yes, that's right.
Business model, and you got to ask them, what do you mean? What do you include when you say business model? Because there's no one answer, and every organization is slightly different. So we want to provide you with a set of tools that will give you flexibility in addressing, and answering questions around what is the strategy and the business model. When we go to the first step, and you'll see we're going in a sequence here. And if everything were perfect in the world and everything was, just happened as it should, you would start with strategy and you would do work processes, and then you'd go to structure. We're going to go clockwise around the STAR here, and that's the way it would be nice to do it if you could do it. But we try and get to the work processes and the capabilities in the organization as quickly as we can, because these are the things that tell us how we're adding value. Strategy and business model, it's mostly an idea, and you need to bring that idea down to the ground and show me what it actually looks like. And that tends to be an answer to the question, what does your organization do? Well, we're app development. Okay, so app development is a work process, and you may be pretty good at it and do it in particular ways that give you some advantage in the marketplace. But app development by itself is a work process that is pretty common across a lot of organizations. So if I'm in fast-moving consumer goods, I had better be pretty good at logistics, supply chain, and manufacturing, right? I got to be pretty good at those things. So figuring out what the organization does and being able to describe that in relatively simple terms so that you can focus attention and resources on getting that work done is what we're about. So what are the major capabilities? We'll talk about, we'll give you some examples of these things, and again, try and give you some tools to say, okay, do these work activities and capabilities represent the things we've got to do really well to make the strategy go, to really make that strategy sing and drive competitive advantage in the workplace? Have we got the right capabilities in there? So we'll focus a lot on that. We'll move over to structure. Sue will be leading most of the conversations around this because of all the designers in the world, I think it's probably fair to say Sue is probably she's got to be top 1-2 people in the world in looking at the distinctions between core structures and your choice of core structures, which is your typical organization chart, and the lateral coordinating the way we integrate across a structure. So just because you choose a functional structure and you got engineering and manufacturing and marketing and sales and HR as your functions, that gets you so far. But until you answer the question, who's in charge of innovation, because the marketing people certainly think they are, and the engineering people think if we build it, they will come, right? There's some tensions there about who owns innovation. And you're not going to get the most out of your structure until you figure out how to get that lateral coordination between the functions. If you choose a geographic structure, and you got EMEA and US and LATAM and APAC, and your customers are worldwide, those regions had better be able to coordinate that, because otherwise your global account is really going to be upset that you can't serve them in one part of the world, even though you're doing it very well in another part. So we're going to spend a lot of time on trying to think about structures, and let's just be clear up front, there is no perfect structure. You're going to have to make some choices about structure that focus attention and resources on the work capabilities, and then figure out, given that choice, how do I coordinate and integrate in a lateral way? And again, I just don't know that there's anybody better in the world at this than Sue Mohrman. And so you got to get a full dose of Sue on Wednesday morning talking about this stuff.
Learning at the foot of the master.
There you go. That's it. Well, management processes is one of these. It's really simple to describe management processes. We're going to focus on 3 of them. We're going to focus on decision making and decision rights. It's kind of a hot topic these days, as everybody talks about accountability and whose neck do I grab when something goes wrong. So there's a lot of conversation about decision rights and decision making now, and so we'll talk about that. We're going to talk a lot about on the broad heading of direction setting. In other words, how do we set goals? How do we plan? How do we allocate resources? I think we focus more on setting goals than anything else, whether it's KPIs, OKRs, whatever TLA your organization uses. And we're going to try and talk about how we do that in a way that aligns the organization. Because if you'll notice on the star there's these funny lines in between each of the bubbles. And so those lines are there not because it makes the model pretty. They're there because they actually mean something. So if you have a particular, let's say, functional structure, and you have to now think about lateral coordination, the way you set the goals for this organization is critical to getting alignment between the structure and the goals and the way people behave. So we're going to talk about decision making. We're going to talk about goal setting and direction setting, you know, kind of in the broad label of strategic planning, if you will. And we're going to talk about communication. Communication is one of those words that everybody says, well, if it went wrong, it must have been we didn't communicate enough. And that's kind of fuzzy. So Beth and Sue and I try and bring that one down to the earth a little bit and say, what do we need to communicate about? What's the information that has to get moved around in the organization in order to be effective? Who's going to provide it through what channel, how often? And we try and really bring that, again, down to the ground a little bit so that we get some traction around communication and it doesn't become this fuzzy sort of word. Other things can go inside of management processes. I think change management and organization development can go in there. I think learning processes often can go in there. So there's some other stuff, but we're going to focus on these three because they represent some really important glue that holds the organization together. And honestly, a lot of organizations like to draw the boxes, but they forget the glue. And the thing kind of falls apart, if I can keep up with that metaphor on that. We'll move over to people and rewards. I'll come in and talk about that at the end of the day on Wednesday. And they're separate on the model because rewards turns out to be an incredibly important lever for design and change. And there's some really interesting discussion going on now about performance management in general, in the Twitter sphere and in the blog space about crowdsourcing and ratings, no rating systems and things like that. And I think a lot of these need to be discussed. Hopefully, we can raise some of those issues. But at the end of the day, we have to recognize that people come to work. There is this relationship. I'm providing some services to the organization. The organization is providing me a job, and is this a fair exchange? Is what I'm contributing to the organization equal to the sort of recognition and rewards I get for that contribution? So we want to really sort of play around with this and recognize that, in the main, HR has been a little slow to change, and there's not a whole lot of innovation here, and we need to get some. So we're going to talk about the nature of rewards, the nature, characteristics and criteria of good reward systems, so that you have a quick little diagnostic that you can use to understand your existing system as well as the kind of system that you want to design to really pull people's behavior in the right direction in support of the strategy. Okay, whether it's, again, we'll talk about variable compensation, bonuses, spot awards, merit-based pay increases, which turn out to fail the criteria a lot of times, the importance of recognition, perquisites, these different kinds of benefits that are showing up as this. There will be no massages given out at the workshop, I can tell you that, so no rewards for participation. Yeah. But we want to talk about that. And then lastly, we want to talk about people. And, at the risk of being really kind of controversial, the notion that people are our most important resource is an interesting notion. And if you look at this model as a systems model, as a way of thinking about a system, people are important, and they may be the most important thing, but I need to hear you say through your diagnostic that it's the people part of the star that's the problem and not the structure. Or I need to hear you say, I'm going to pull these people out for leadership development because that's the most important thing we can do. If you don't tell me that or show me how that's true, then you could be pulling people out and giving them leadership development and then sticking them back in the system that produced the bad behavior in the first place. So I don't want to deny that people aren't important. They're absolutely crucial. skills and knowledge in the organization, the right set of competencies, the appropriate the hiring process that brings the right people in to do the kinds of work that this organization has chosen to do. These are crucial decisions. And so we want to talk about, what are those characteristics of selection, recruitment, retention processes that work. And we want to see that in the context of the design and understand that, so that we say, people are important and we can support that, because these are the kind of people I need to make this particular design go. If you have a bureaucratic organization and you hire in a lot of people with needs for achievement and you just stick them under a bunch of rules, do you think they're going to thrive? On the other hand, if you have a customer-centric organization and you hire a bunch of introverts, and I'm making things very simple here just to make a point, are you going to have a set of effective people that are going to reach out to customers, find out what their needs are, right? We have to figure out how to complement the structure with the right kind of people in the organization. So we want to look at this as a system. All 6 of these points, the 5 points on the star and strategy, these all have to work together in alignment, right, to produce the kind of performance that we're looking for. So that's my kind of quick summary of the STAR model and some ways of thinking about each of the parts of the STAR. And at this point, I'm going to sort of turn it over to Beth and ask her if she would sort of walk you through some ideas about how best to take advantage of the seminar when we get together.
Great.
So Beth, over to you on how to get the most out of the workshop.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, everybody. I was in your position. I'm trying to figure out if it was 12, 15 years ago when I came to the first course. So I've been in your place, and I just want to spend a bit of time here before we open it up for questions to get you thinking about how can you best leverage what you're going to learn in the week. The one thing that would help us, though, is if we go to the next slide, and we're going to put a poll up so that we get a sense of what do you hope to get out of the workshop. So choose your top 2. As you look down that list, so are you looking for frameworks and tools to take back for when you're designing in your organization? Are you looking to build your network and benchmark with other companies? Do you want to build some internal design capability within your company, so you want to learn more about that? Do you want to get advice and answers? You're chewing on a specific design challenge, and you'd really like to get both from Sue, Chris, and myself and the other participants some advice. Are you looking to expand your external network? We've got a broad range of companies coming and a broad range of experiences, so your ability to expand your personal network. You might be struggling with how do I influence leaders on implementing designs and keeping them away from just going right to structure. And then the last one is understand the current research on org design. So hopefully you've been checking off your top 2 while I've been filling time here with my litany of lists here.
We'll just give everybody a short chance to pick their best 2, and we'll show the results and see what we got. Yep.
And then I think I'm going to have a little difficulty seeing it. So Chris, when the top 4 goes up, if you could just give me a quick rundown.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just give a couple more seconds here. Nora,
you maybe wanted to check everything, but we wanted to get your top 2.
Okay, here we go. Roughly 11 responses. A little more than half of the folks said frameworks and tools, so that's by far the number 1 answer. And then it's kind of split evenly across benchmarking, ideas on how to build an internal design capability, how do I get leaders committed to the design, and understanding the current research.
Oh, great.
But the real clear winner is frameworks and tools.
Yeah. Yep. And I think, speaking from experience, you're going to come away with probably more tools than you know what to do with. And one of the things that you can think about, and even as we go through the program, you can be thinking about is how do you translate those back into your organization? So we're going to give you a whole host of tools, and then it's up to you to say, how do I translate that? So I've taken a number of those tools. Some made sense for the organization I worked in, some didn't. Some I translated into the language that made sense. So you will get, like I said, more than you probably would have imagined, the tools and the toolkit that you'll walk away with. Okay, so if we go to the next page, just some advice for you to think about as you're preparing in these last 2 weeks. There is a lot of material. We're going to be sharing case study examples. On the last day, you're going to hear from Becky Spears, who built org design capability within Sun Microsystems and now Oracle. So you're going to get a wide range of material. As Chris said, there is, we're not going to cheat you out of any time. So know that the days are jam-packed. There is a lot of content. So I'm going to tell you right now that at the end of the last day, you are going to be very tired, very spent. You're going to wonder, how in the world would I ever apply all this information? And that kind of takes me down. I'm going to jump to that very last point. What I would advise you to do is start thinking now about how you're going to take all this information and take it back into your company. So what I suggest you even do now is schedule an hour to 90 minutes a week. No, that's Thanksgiving week. The first week in December, I put 60 to 90 minutes on your calendar for you to go through all these materials, to sort through them, to pull out what is going to make sense for your organization. What did you learn? What do you want to share with others? So that's the first thing. The second thing I'd recommend you do is start thinking now about what small group might you do a teach back within your organization. So you might take a couple content pieces from the course and teach it back to some of your HR business partners in a lunch and learn in a very low risk situation. One of the best ways to learn is, after you've learned something, is to teach it back to others. So I would suggest that maybe 2 months from now, maybe right after the first of the year, you set up a lunch and learn or a 60-minute, sort of a taste of org design with a small group within your organization. So some things to make the actual week a little bit easier to digest is, you're now here on the webinar, so you've got a sense for the STAR. You did get the pre-work packet, so would really encourage you to read through Jay's Designing Org book, which is very helpful, and then spend some time with that pre-work tool. That's that yellow booklet that was mailed with you. That gives you a real good sense to ground you in a current situation that you're dealing with. It makes it much easier for you to apply the tools and the frameworks that you're learning back to something that is, front and center in your mind back at the office. Chris talked about this as being first principles, and this is really your core knowledge base. So thinking throughout the week, and even if you're coming in a team of people, I know a number of you are coming, several of you from the same company. What you might want to do is schedule a lunch, or even after, over lunch, sit together, or, have dinner one of the nights. When I went through, I've gone through it several times, I've brought a number of groups, HR business partners, is we would, at the end of each day, we would regroup and talk about what are the top things that we learned today that we think we could apply back at our organization. So use it as real-time learning to capture, how am I going to take this back? Like I said, you are going to feel quite overwhelmed at the end of the week. So the more you can do to start capturing your learning and how you can apply it, the better off you're going to be when you go back to the office. Okay, with that, we can open up the chat box. If people have questions or comments about the content, the flow of the week, anything logistics, any questions about the pre-read?
We got one in the Q&A box. David asked if in Galbraith's model, do we account for external environment and strategy? Yes, absolutely. In fact, we'll speak directly to that right first thing on Tuesday morning, and the importance of understanding the context, right, within which the organization is operating, and talk about the importance of that. So absolutely true. You can put money in the bank on that one. We'll for sure talk about it. And Nora, if you can unmute people, we can have questions, or people can talk about things in the Q&A or the chat box.
All right.
While you're doing that, one of the things I just neglected, I see here, is just to remind you that we will have a bit of homework in the evening. It's nothing arduous. Don't think that it's going to be cramming for the next day. It's going to be predominantly some case studies, and frankly, there's some pretty interesting case studies that we'll give you at the end of the day to read over the evening. So nothing big, but 15 minutes maybe 20 minutes of reading.
Yeah. Wall Street Journal article, or a Fortune article, things like that. Yeah. So, any comments or questions from the gathered? Jump right in if you have one. Or maybe somebody said to me the other day when they asked a question of a large group, somebody said, somebody goes second.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I don't have any questions, just wanting to share that I'm excited to spend the week learning a lot about org design and just getting to meet other folks across different organizations.
Oh, good.
You're gonna be really happy.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. No,
I don't know where. Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, sorry. I said it's a lot of fun. You got 30. I think got 35, 36, 37
39.
people, and 39. Yeah, and so it's a lot of folks from a lot of different places with a lot of questions, and we do our absolute best to get around. So there's 3 of us, right? And by all means, during breaks, during presentations, speak right up, ask questions. We all like getting involved with what you guys are wrestling with.
And I don't know where all of you are coming from in the U.S., but Redondo Beach, the conference room looks right out over the water. It's a beautiful spot. So
and don't tell the expense people. Yeah. Don't tell the finance people where you're going to be. Yeah.
Can I ask a question about so from the airport, should I rent a car, or am I best taking an Uber?
Got it. No, actually, it's a great. You don't know how good a question this is. LAX has just implemented a change in the way you pick up Ubers and taxis and Lyfts. So as you're coming into LAX, you'll go down to the baggage claim area, and you'll grab a green, it's a lime green. It's something right out of the 60s. And it's called the LAX-IT bus. And it doesn't matter whether you take an Uber or just a regular taxi or a Lyft or in even some of the other ones. That green bus will take you over to a parking lot just outside, and then you can use your app to either grab your Lyft or Uber, or there's a taxi line, a taxi queue sitting there once you get off the thing. And just tell your taxi driver you want to go to the Portofino in Redondo Beach near Kings Harbor. And if you've got the address, so much the better. But that's the best way to do it. It's a very short drive, maybe 15 minutes, depending on if you've got some traffic on Sepulveda Boulevard. But it's actually pretty easy to do. Yep. No, actually, a really good question. I'm glad you asked that, because they literally
just made the change November 1st.
They just did it.
Okay.
And I got lime green bus. Yeah, I had the pleasure of being there on the second day, and I used some bad words when I was there. So
awesome. Thank you.
You bet. No, great question. Any others? Beth, we're getting efficient, Beth. We got that done in 45 minutes. That's
yep.
good.
So we're going to give you some time back, and we look forward to meeting all of you in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank you. I'm excited
cool.
as well.
Okay.
Thanks.
You guys take care. Have a good weekend.
Okay, you too.
Bye.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye.